Good evening, everybody. And if you're just tuning in, thank you so much for joining us. You are watching or listening to The Angel Rock with myself, Lorilei Potvin, your host. Just a few things before we introduce our fantastic guest. He is a returning guest, and you guys loved him, so I'm so glad he's back. But if you've never tuned into The Angel Rock before, my name is Lorilei Potvin. Like I said, I am a Canadian psychic medium. I'm a crystal Reiki energy healer, an Akashic Records practitioner, spiritual teacher and mentor, and I'm also a nurse. In the show The Angel Rock, I feature all aspects, I say, of the supernatural, and it goes anywhere from something within the paranormal to ETs, UFOs. We also talk about the power of the mind, power of positive thinking, energy, chakras, you name it. We talk about all these things. And I have wonderful, amazing people from all over the world as my guests. Through the work that they're doing, they make a positive change for humanity. Now, the guest that I have this evening definitely is one of those people. He has two books out. We're going to touch on his second book, which we should have done the first show, but I'll explain that in a few minutes. His name is Paul Anthony Wallis. I'm going to read a bit of his biography for you. He's a researcher, speaker, leadership coach, healer in Chinese traditions, mentor, and author of books of spirituality and mysticism. He researches the world's mythologies for how they speak to our origins as a species and our potential today as human beings. And I said, I'm reading from my post actually with the banner, and we're going to be talking about those things and many things. Welcome, Paul. I'm so glad to have you back. I can't hear you, Paul. I don't know if you're on mute, maybe. I don't know. I'll have to see. There you go.
Hi, is that better?
I can hear you. Yes.
All right. Lorilei, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show again.
Well, thank you. I was going to say, I actually talked to you before we just started, and Joe said, well, maybe he doesn't have his headset in. So I'm glad that works now. I'm so glad to have you here. Hopefully my internet is better. We just got upgraded. So hopefully there's no delay. So thank you so much for coming back.
So far, so good. Oh, it's a pleasure. I really enjoyed our last conversation.
So did I. I've been saying to everybody on the air and off the air, and I know you're going to be on my partner Dell's show, so thank you. I've been saying to them, what a pleasure to talk to you about the topics we talked about last time. And you're very aware of our limitations on at least this platform where we're streaming from with video, which is YouTube. And I should remind people, I forgot, and I do need to let people know our main United Public Radio Network channel at the moment is completely gone bye-bye, not through any fault of our own. But where you will find us right now is on, I believe it's, UFO Radio Network. You can find us still on YouTube. Please join us over there because I keep an eye on the chat and I try and make you part of the show. We also have a new channel, and because it's new, I've had a little bit of trouble trying to find it. So you may not be able to. I don't know if I have the link in the banner, but it's called UFO Gods and Extraterrestrials. But I'll be on the UFO Paranormal Radio channel on YouTube. So please pop over there if you want to watch the show and be part of the conversation. Okay, sorry, I forgot. I got to get that out of the way there so to remind them.
Lorilei, I should quickly correct a little something in the intro you gave me, which was fabulous, with one detail altered. You said I was a healer in the Chinese tradition, and there'll be people watching who'll say, Paul doesn't know anything about Chinese healing. It's actually in the Christian tradition. Not to be in any way tribal about it, because I find that there are modalities in every culture and they overlap in the most amazing way. But I just thought I should.
No, you should. There's a big difference. And I apologize. I don't know if that was the bio I got sent to me. I think it was. And that's
no worries.
He's, you know what, and he's amazing, you guys. Gavin Lee Davies, he sends me the most amazing guests, and he does all the work for me. So I apologize. Thank you for correcting me, because people will be asking you about all kinds of Chinese.
I know. I take my hat off to Chinese expertise, but I'm not an expert in that area.
Thank you. Well, you know what? We're going to start there because I want to hear more about what you do. We're going to get into all kinds of things as we did the last time. So what does a Christian healer do? What exactly modalities do you use? And I'd love to hear more about that.
Sure. Well, I learned about healing in a Christian context. I became a Christian when I was about 17 years old, and it was at a time of what we would call renewal, where people were having very powerful spiritual experiences,
Mhm.
and we were all trying to get our heads around what this meant, how it was happening, and we were seeing a lot of what you might call spontaneous healings happening, although they were, I say spontaneous, they were healings by intention as well, where somebody might come with a physical problem, and then we would do various things to try and draw upon divine power to address the problem. And so in the church I started going to as a teenager, there was a lady who started seeing in an eye that had no optic nerve. And we had to get our heads around how that was happening. But you
Wow.
ask about the modalities. The modalities we were learning were modalities used by different cultures around the world for thousands of years. Things like placing your hands over the affected area with the intention of bringing a healing energy into that part of the body. And
Mhm.
I've done that many times over the decades and seen amazing things happen right in front of our eyes. Reiki specialists, of course, do exactly the same.
I was just going to say
Uh,
that I was,
yeah,
except they use
it's the
sigils,
same
but
thing.
can't, right?
Different language,
Yes.
and maybe a different philosophical framework, but you look at what's being done, how it's being done, the intention, the result, and it's the same thing. Another very interesting thing, and we learned this from modeling our practice on what we saw Jesus do in the Gospels, is speaking to conditions as if they are intelligent entities.
I love
So
it.
speaking to a fever and saying, that's enough of that, you go now.
Yes.
And I learned this in the context of the church. And then as I carried on growing and traveling, realized there are people in every culture, in every spiritual tradition who has very similar practices.
Agree.
And there's a funny moment in the gospel where Jesus, he's been traveling around doing things like this, doing entity removal, healing, and a couple of his team members come up to him and they say, we found someone else doing this, but they weren't one of us, so we told them to stop it.
Why?
And Jesus said, why? What
Yeah.
on earth did
Why?
you do that for? And so I take my lead from that I applaud anyone who's learning that we are amazing beings and
Yeah.
that divine power is amazing power, and that there are ways we can just plug into it and learn how to self-heal and heal others in ways that are very, very powerful, often very, very quick, and often in ways that we actually can't explain. The thing happens and then we have to work out, how did that happen?
Mhm.
And I'm very happy to be part of an international learning community through platforms like this, Lorilei, really, as we compare notes and find out from one another what's going on.
I have to agree with you because when you were describing about the laying on hands, and I would call it the aura or energy field, right, over top of the affected area, and I do something called crystal Reiki, which involves some of the sigils. But you know what? Sometimes I forget because it's so powerful. And I always tell people because they'll say, oh my God, you're so amazing. No, it's not me. I am just the vessel. I say, I'm the mailman. We're delivering from God or whatever their belief system is. For me, it's God. And I say, I'm channeling that energy through. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. I always say that's my sign for truth. And I'm focusing. And the other thing is, the use of color. I work with, there's healers
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
that's part of their job, if you will, to help and assist, right? So I agree with you about that. And I love because I don't think I've ever heard it referred to as Christian type of healing. And I love it because actually what you're describing is many of the things that I do myself in my healing work. So I love it that you shared that.
Now, something that you will have seen and that I learned originally in this Christian context
Mhm.
is that if someone had a problem and they wanted help, they wanted ministry for healing, people
Right.
would gather around them. And before doing anything, if people were laying on hands, You look around the circle and you watch everyone will do this. And you realize they've just slowed their breathing.
Yes.
Now, nobody taught us to do that. We just did it instinctively because we're trying to get ourselves into a more receptive state. And I've since learned that controlled conscious breathing is used in ancient traditions, shamanic traditions, mystical traditions all around the world as a way of heightening our state of consciousness. And so I've learned that from various mystics in the Orthodox tradition. And of course, now I discover it's in Buddhist traditions, it's in Native American traditions. You can find it everywhere, that controlled conscious breathing alters our state, alters our brain waves, and all of a sudden we're able to perceive things and do things that in our normal rush and worry we don't do. But it's something that's accessible to all of us. And in the Scars of Eden, I talk a little bit about language and translation and how retranslating things can totally reframe how we see something. And we tend to listen to figures like Buddha or Jesus through a religious ear.
Right.
And the moment you decode it and try and listen in more neutral language, you realize they're saying something far more accessible,
right,
far more powerful, far more universal than you at first think. And the first sermon that Matthew's gospel tells us Jesus toured with was a sermon that said, the amazing power of the source is available to every one of us. When you translate the religious language out of it, that was the message. And then he went around demonstrating that. So it was understanding that and following that that led me into experiences of healing, self-healing, entity removal, and all the rest of it.
I love it. Just one sec, because I'm going to go a little further with that. I want to give a shout out to Zach Mann and Michelle Pratt that are in the chat. Welcome, everybody. We're glad to have you here. And Michelle is from Australia. She just said, "Good day, y'all."
G'day.
So I'm glad she's here. We
Welcome.
Found us by accident. I think she did actually a couple months ago, and she's been hanging out with us. We love having everybody here. So if anybody else is listening live, come on, pop over to the YouTube channel. Like I said, we'd love to have you here. And I agree with you about these healing modalities. I can't tell you, the last time when you were on the show was about a month or probably about 4 to 6 weeks ago. Many of the things that you've said, that you've shared from both your books, Escaping from Eden and now The Scars of Eden, we're going to talk about both of them. Those are things that I say in my practice when I put on my spiritual teaching hat, if you will. And I've said this so many times about, I believe the human body is completely capable of healing itself. But what we encounter, whether through its trauma, belief systems, emotional blockages, whatever it may be, that it tends to conglomerate. Everything is energy, and that's how we get dis-ease. But I have shared that show that we did because of many of the things you've talked about things I teach about as well, about the potential we have as human beings that we have been told has never been possible. What really stuck with me, I enjoyed every second of our last show that we did, Paul, but when you were talking about that almost savant-like system and getting into, did they create a really higher version of us and realize that no, we didn't want to be subservient? I'm going to get you to explain what us is, and I know you're going to be much more, I want to say, better equipped, you use better verbiage, if you will, to explain this concept. And the reason why is because when we see people that have maybe had a head injury or a near-death experience, it's like it's switched on, a light switch, and all these abilities are accessed. I'd love you to explain more about that, what you found in your research.
Sure. Yes, the syndrome is called acquired savant syndrome. It's studied by neurologists around the world. It's genuine peer-reviewed science.
Right.
Daryl Trefford, professor at Marion University, I think, has tracked more than 70 cases of acquired savant syndrome. And the pattern is when somebody has a head injury, usually, or a central nervous system event, a stroke. And when they emerge from it, they have heightened cognitive abilities. Suddenly they are fluent in a language they weren't fluent in before, or they can play an instrument they couldn't play before, or they're brilliant at mathematics, or their memory has just gone to the max. So Orlando Serrell would be an example, who was hit in the head by a baseball when he was 10 years old, and it concussed him. Well, when he came to, being a 10-year-old boy, he finished the match, and he didn't tell his mum what had happened. But he suffered from terrible headaches for about a year. And then when they receded, he found he had this incredible capacity in calendar mathematics, that if you ask him how many Thursdays between the 29th of April 1953 and the 3rd of March 1964, he'll tell you just like that. Ask him what he was doing on the 23rd of November 1988. He'll tell you just like that. And he did not have that ability before. There was an amazing study, I think it was a Dr. Drago who performed this study, where he brought in a number of art critics to evaluate the art of a particular female artist. And they looked at, I think it was 22 paintings that she had produced. They were all shown them randomly, out of sync, out of timeline, out of any context, and they just noted their different remarks. And then afterwards, all the remarks were correlated, and all these different art critics from different schools of art had essentially tracked an increase in every measure of this lady's skill level and creativity. And what they had not been told is the timeline they were following was the timeline of her dementia.
Wow.
And so as her brain became more damaged, her skill level was increasing, and her creativity and her intelligence artistically. And when they reflected on that, I think it was Dr. Bruce Miller, who studies it as well in the States, said we appear to be looking at a disinhibition of some of the brain's visual systems. Well, any layperson listening to that would say, disinhibition. Well, what are the inhibiting systems doing there? What are the inhibitors doing there? How did they get there? And these neurologists are asking the same question. How come there are higher abilities in our brains in the off position? It's absolutely puzzling. But our ancestors say they have an answer for that. And the answer is we all have these abilities.
I agree.
They are all in the off position most of the time, because those who engineered our ancestors adapted us that way. They had engineered a being who was too intelligent, too conscious to be managed as a workforce. And so they found a way of dumbing us down to the point where we can only respond to our 5 physical senses, or we're dependent on an authority telling us what's what. And they found that helpful.
So
the story,
because what I want to add to that is, I have always asked since I was a little girl, why do people need a leader? Like, why can't they think for themselves? I've always asked this. I've never understood this. And people naturally do this. Doesn't matter what situation, you've got a group of people, whether it's fictitious on television, or you might see it in it's not really reality TV, we all know, but fake reality like Survivor. Doesn't matter where it is, people will gravitate towards one person who takes the lead and everybody follows, right?
That's absolutely right. And it is fascinating and it is mystifying. I mean, on the one hand, you might say, well, that's just a natural specialization of skills, isn't it? But I don't know. I think in our culture, we take it a little further than that. I mean, you only have to see a couple of despots or autocrats in your life to know we take it a lot further than that.
Yeah.
You start suffering because of legislation that disadvantages a whole tranche of people, and you realize we take it a lot further than that. And again, just to bring it back to Jesus, there's a famous quote in which he said, "You have no superiors."
Right.
Call no one on earth your leader. You have no leaders. no one on earth your father, you have no fathers, you are all peers, you're all brothers and sisters. And that was the vision he presented to us.
Mm-hmm.
But the stories of our ancestors say that the earliest experience we ever had of being governed, that kind of leadership, was an experience of humans being governed by another species.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the story of the ancient Sumerians. The Scars of Eden argues that's the story of the Bible when it's properly translated. Greeks, Nordics, Indians tell the same story in the Vedas. And then the Popol Vuh, I was just going to come to, because they are so transparent in the way they talk about visitors coming from another planet, having a long sequence of experiments to get a species that was intelligent enough to serve them, but not so intelligent that they become a threat. And so they hardwired us as best they knew how to be led, hardwired us for leadership. And you can see that impulse in almost every culture. And I find it very interesting now, having come to the conclusion that that is our real history, then going back to the teachings of people like Jesus and realizing they're trying to undo that hardwiring by saying you have no superiors, by teaching us to stop sacrificing to those above us. We need to learn to serve one another, not serve superiors. And many of the spiritual greats through history have reframed the whole idea of serving God as meaning we serve one another. We serve each other when we need help. We serve each other by loving and caring for one another. We serve one another by how we treat the vulnerable in our society. And that's the only place that the word service should really be being used. We shouldn't be using that concept to stratify our society into superiors and inferiors.
Now, Michelle, I don't know if I agree with this, but I can see it happening. As she says, we need a leader as we need someone to blame when it all goes wrong. I don't know if I agree with that, but yeah, people do, I guess, depending on what type of person you are and personality. But even as a child, going back to this, I've always recognized that we are all the same. Like, we all have the same physical part. Well, I mean, aside from male and female, but you know what I'm saying. And I agree with you that nobody has anything more special than anybody else. Yes, we all have special gifts and talents. That's true. But yes, we are all part of each other. And when you were talking about, we're going to get to the they and why you feel this way, because I totally concur with your research and what you've shared in your books. You said you believe there was a human being, we want to call it 1.0, before what we're presently at. And who are the they for people that may not be aware?
The ancient Sumerians who told this story called the they the sky people.
Yeah.
The ancient Hebrews who began the Hebrew tradition and the Hebrew scriptures called them the powerful ones. The Mesoamericans called them those who engineer. The Vedas called them the kings. And essentially what we're talking about is a species with advanced tech who arrived on planet Earth thousands of years ago,
right,
before Homo sapiens sapiens, as we know ourselves to be, had happened. And they arrived on a devastated planet that needed recovery, rehabilitation, and then they worked with a primate ancestor to engineer us, and they colonized us and governed our planet for a long time before handing over to viceroys and successors, and the rest, as they say, is history. And it's a story that repeats all around the world. And it was the correlations of those stories that first got my attention, and realized there's a very interesting story that's been hidden in plain sight for a long time.
Right. So now, what was the impetus for writing your second book? We talked about your first book. It was because that, and I'm going to share this quickly. I shared in the last show, but our mutual friend and who you work with, Gavin Lee Davies with publishing, he had introduced me to Paul in October, and things got crazy. So by the time I finally got a chance to have you on, you already had your second book out, and it was when you were on about 6 weeks ago, it was ready to pre-order, but we can buy it now, right?
Yes, The Scars of Eden is available now. You can go Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kindle, Hive, wherever books are sold, and you'll be able to order your copy right now.
Yes, yes. And the thing is, I want to make sure I always get the title to your first book wrong. I know it's not Escaping from Eden. Is that it?
That's right.
I thought
Escaping
so.
from
I thought
Eden.
so.
Yeah. I know sometimes people struggle with it because it's such a counterintuitive title. Why would you want to escape from Eden?
Okay, why would
And,
you?
Well, obviously, I mean, the word Eden, we hear it, we think, that sounds lovely, we think paradise.
Yes.
But the moment you start doing some translation work and reading the root meanings of the words in these texts, it emerges very quickly that Eden wasn't a paradise. It was an enclosed zone where our ancestors were genetically engineered. And that was where we had our existence originally. We would go out from it, I believe, to do mining work for those who had colonized us. And we're told in the book of Genesis that there were some key mineral deposits conveniently close to the enclosed zone of Eden. But that's essentially what it was. It's where we emerged as Homo sapiens sapiens, but it's also the place of our earliest traumatic memories. And some of what happened there, I talk about in Escaping from Eden and explain why it's not a paradise we would want to return to. It's a place of very painful memory where we just have fragmentary memories of what happened to us in that place.
Are you able to give a little hint for our listeners and watchers? I don't want you to give it all away because I want them to go out and buy your amazing book, but maybe a little hint,
Well,
an idea.
yeah.
What are you talking about here?
So we've talked a little bit about the fact that there was a real push and pull among our ancient colonizers as to how intelligent they wanted the human race to be. So they began with a primate, and then they began adapting that and adapting that. And there was a faction that wanted to keep us like a slave species, who wanted us so unintelligent that we didn't even know we were naked, but intelligent enough that we could do work for them, much like an elephant might work or a horse might work. And then there was another faction that became a little bit closer to us, who were more hands-on in the genetic engineering, who wanted us not to be a race of clones or drones, but wanted us to be a fertile species, intelligent and conscious enough to have a happy life. Because he found that what they had produced, and in the Sumerian stories, it's Enki who does these experiments. In the Hebrew, it's the serpent who does these experiments. And they found that before we were fertile, able to reproduce, intelligent enough, conscious enough to enjoy life, we were all depressed. And that actually wasn't good. And so it was that faction or that entity that said, no, I want to upgrade these. And there's a big fight over it, and he breaks ranks, he upgrades us, and then there's a huge stink and a conflict among the sky people / powerful ones / those who engineer. And that conflict is repeated in other ancestral narratives. The Greeks have a version of this story where Prometheus has made us too smart, given us too much tech, and so Zeus bombs us back into a pre-civilization state so that we have to re-evolve. In Genesis, you've got Genesis 11, the Babel story, where we've actually developed into a civilization, a spacefaring civilization. And then we are bombed out of that condition and damaged so severely. It's like we suffer a collective stroke, and we are back in a state where we no longer have the power of speech. So this is a phenomenally violent action against us. And the way the translation runs at the moment, it's God who does that to us because we built a building too tall. We've infringed building codes. And you read that and you think, that can't be right. Well, it isn't right. Do the translation work and you realize our ancestors were caught in a crossfire between different ET demographics warring over what should happen with regard to Project Earth and Project Humanity. And if you imagine some poor primate going through this life cycle and down the generations becoming a slave species, and then down the generations we are intelligent and conscious and we have a good life, down the generations we build a civilization, and then all that is taken from us and we have to start again. Imagine living in a society like this, and you wake up tomorrow and we've all been so damaged that you can't communicate with your children anymore. You can't communicate with your doctor, and civilization collapses. These are phenomenal traumas. Think about the story of the flood, which is in Genesis 6 and in every culture around the world. To have your civilization wiped out like that, what greater trauma could there be? And our stories of creation, curated by so many different ancestral narratives, begin in the moment after that, when our ancestors are huddling for survival on what bits of land have survived this cataclysm. You put all that together and you think, blimmin' heck, these are not happy stories. And yet we put them all in children's Bibles and expect parents to read them to kids. There's another lovely story, darling. Have a good night's sleep. Yes. It does not really make sense. And children will tell you that. They will ask the questions. Why didn't God see what was going to happen? Why did he want to murder everyone with a flood? Why did he destroy that civilization? Why did he want us so stupid we didn't know we were naked? Why did he want there only to be males and to be lonely in the world? A child spots these, asks the questions, and in Escaping from Eden, I talk about suffering an ultimate frisbee injury that finally gave me the time to go back to those very obvious questions and realize these are essentially translation issues, and do the translation work, and this whole other story emerges.
You know, I agree with every word that you're saying here. And you know, I think I came across this quite by accident when I was doing paranormal research when we went through what we went through in our previous home. Not that I didn't believe in the paranormal. I always say it found us. We never went looking for it. So it was a full-time job, 12 to 18 hours a day. And I happened to be looking up the Nephilim, of all things. I wanted to find out more about this. And I'm probably not saying it right, depending on who pronounces it. I've heard it pronounced a million different ways. But then I came across about the Anunnaki and about the Dead Sea. And then if you look at it from above the earth, it's a black scar. There's high radiation levels. And excuse me, as I went deeper and deeper, I went, holy crap, this makes a heck of a lot of sense. And why do we not know about this? Now I know why, but
yes.
Like, why have we never heard this?
Exactly. The Scars of Eden follows a number of stories showing how this information that was known by our ancestors came to be suppressed and hidden.
Okay.
I can give a couple of examples of how that happened. I mean,
I know you want to give it all away, but whatever you can, because when people hear these little tidbits, they go, oh my goodness, I got to know more. I got to get that book.
Well, one, for instance, is how it got lost in the Hebrew tradition. And that is that in the 6th century BCE, and there's a very wide scholarly agreement about this, in the 6th century BCE, all the scrolls and books that make up the Hebrew canon were edited. They were given a very heavy edit and a scissors and paste redaction to harmonize them and turn them into a continual God story, with God in the story from beginning to end. Because by the 6th century BCE, Judaism was firmly monotheistic, and its great contribution to the world was to say there is only one God, and that God is the cosmic source.
Right.
And they wanted that to be the message of all these stories, except that some of these old stories were not God stories. Some of these old stories were retellings of the Sumerian stories of the Sky People. Right. And so when they translated out the powerful ones and the ones like the powerful ones and put the word God in all those texts, it hid the ET aspect of those stories. When it used the word men or angels for entities that were clearly not human, it hid the ET aspect of what was going on. And it was part of a great forgetting.
Mm-hmm.
There is a great forgetting commanded in the Hebrew scriptures. The Ten Commandments begins, you shall have only one powerful one. Don't bow down to the others. Don't even depict them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that Elohim, the one who's taken the name Yahweh, wants his people to forget there are any others, except the stories roll on and you realize that Yahweh is in competition with the other powerful ones. And that's what makes sense of those stories. You get to Joshua, Moses gave the Ten Commandments. Joshua, his successor, comes along and says, cut yourself off from the powerful ones that your ancestors served in Mesopotamia. Don't work for the powerful ones that the Egyptians served or that the Amorites served. As for me and my household, we're only going to serve the entity called Yahweh. So again, there's an acknowledgement of these other powerful entities. But as soon as you use the word God to cover up these other entities, or in some texts, demons, false god, kings, chieftains, you lose the whole context. Now, when Christianity came along, there was a big debate as to what should be done with those old stories. Should the church re-endorse that 6th century edit and accept it all as God's story? And there were early church fathers who said absolutely not, because they're not God's stories. They're stories about something else. And the church fathers who said that were Clement of Alexandria, Origen, Irenaeus, absolutely foundational people. Origen is the father of hermeneutics, the principles of Bible interpretation. Irenaeus is the guy who came up with the phrase Old Testament and New Testament.
Right.
So they're not fringy people.
Mm-hmm.
They were central people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was their view. But they got gradually silenced, excommunicated. The one who went the furthest with this was Marcion, and by 144 AD, he had been censured, excommunicated, declared a heretic. He had an enormous influence across Eastern Europe, and now we can't find a single page that he wrote because it all got lost. And then the process goes on as orthodoxy narrows and narrows. And as that narrowing got anchored to imperial power, so in 381, Emperor Theodosius settles a theological debate in the church on the basis that he's emperor.
Okay.
By doing that, he's shown we're in a feudal society here with God at the top, then the emperor, then sandwiched in the middle the bishops, and then all you people at the bottom. He'd anchored his own power, but it also declared anyone who was teaching a different story of origins is now not only a heretic, they're an enemy of the state, essentially. They're not going to get a teaching position. They probably won't get a public position. And that's when texts like the Gnostic Gospels began to be buried in the desert to stop them being destroyed, because not only could you not teach them, you wouldn't want them in the public libraries, you wouldn't want them in your private library. They're going to be gotten rid of. And so the Nag Hammadi Desert became the hiding place for the Gnostic Gospels, which told stories of different explanations of origins, different explanations of who we are in the cosmos, what contact we're in, what we're capable of. So it was an editing out of these other stories. And even the process of putting everything into Latin as the Roman Empire went on meant that indigenous story got lost. Because if you didn't speak the local language, how could you understand the local stories and the local texts? And so we reached the point, for instance, where no one could read the Egyptian hieroglyphics anymore, because that knowledge had been deliberately sidelined. I had a grandfather who was Welsh, and when he was a boy, if he spoke Welsh in public, he was committing a crime, because the government in Westminster wanted to extinguish Welsh culture. And they thought if we force everyone to speak English, we can obliterate Welsh culture and Welsh memory. Well, that's exactly what the Roman Empire did with Latin, and it lost all that other knowledge, except, as I point out in the Scars of Eden, all that ancient knowledge goes somewhere.
Right.
and has a way of resurfacing generations later. And I track some of those stories.
I love this, but it's giving me shivers up by my spine because everything we've started this show with, we've been talking about, even from the last show we did, all I keep hearing is when we don't learn what happens through the eras of history, or if you want to call it the centuries of history, and we don't learn from our past mistakes, we are destined to keep creating and making the same mistakes over and over. And just some of the stuff you've talked about, I know we have to be very careful with this topic and the words that we use, but it's so reminiscent of even where we are today. Like it just
I
seems. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I do think that many of our ancestral stories were bequeathed to us kind of as warnings as to the kind of things that can happen, as
Mhm.
orientations in how the world works. And
Right.
I think our world mythologies and ancestral narratives are tremendous gifts reminding us who we are, what we're capable of, but also some of the dynamics of government, whether we're being governed by ETs, as our ancestors were, or by fellow human beings. How do we prosper and thrive and remain conscious, intelligent, informed, and healthy
Mhm.
in a world where being managed really is the watchword?
Mhm. I have to agree with you, but just even some of the things you're talking about, like when you were talking about the primates, and I remember this as a very small child, the Planet of the Apes series, and
Oh, yes, very powerful.
powerful, and you think about that, like, that really sat with me because I was quite small when, I mean, I'll be 56 in August, so I can't remember when it came out, but I was quite small, and then as I got older and started to think about it, and, like, thinking, how do we know that there's not maybe a planet out there like this, or there was something akin to, or was this a message, or what was it, right? Because humans were
Ah,
animals in this.
absolutely. I mean,
Mhm.
the Planet of the Apes really is quite profound if you look at the basic story of it.
And not
And
the new
Pierre,
one, not the new one. The new one's a completely different story. We're talking the originals, right?
yeah, the originals. Go to the originals. Although I must give credit to the Mark Wahlberg Planet of the Apes,
Yeah,
because there are some really interesting layers in that. The
there is.
basic story, of course, is of apes being genetically modified to be intelligent enough to be a useful slave species. So that's basically a retelling of these
Yes.
ancient narratives.
Mhm.
We are being given an object lesson in what that looks like. Some people might say we're also being given a little warning about what could happen if we start doing that kind of genetic modification. And when we hear about contemporary experiments, very quickly people are making references to the Planet of the Apes canon and saying, don't you remember how this worked out last time?
Yes.
But it really is a retelling of these ancient stories of our engineering. And there's a lovely touch in the Mark Wahlberg version of the story where they go to the forbidden grounds of Kalima. Now, first of all, that whole idea that there are forbidden places because of technology we're not allowed to know about, well,
Mhm.
that's for real. I mean, that just is I mean, think Area 51 for a start, but there are ancient archaeological sites that have been buried for their protection, so the official story goes, or we're not told about at all. And particularly in the Middle East, where ancient technology, I believe, exists, has been found, but is now in a World Heritage Site and can't be interfered with or known about. I don't want to say too much, but I am in touch with people who know
Mhm.
that Allied forces have been involved in sequestering some of this
Yes.
tech and some of
I
these
have
finds and
heard this.
taking it back to the States for use or analysis or whatever it might be. Well, there it is in the Planet of the Apes. There's this ancient tech, a crashed craft
Mhm.
um, at the sacred grounds of Kalima.
Mhm.
And then when Marky Mark gets there, he found, oh my goodness, it's a crashed ship. No wonder the apes don't want anyone getting here. No wonder they don't want the humans knowing their true history. Right. And then he gets there and he rubs off the grit from Kalima, and it says, caution live animals. And the letters have been obscured by the dusts of time. And he realizes he's in a place of genetic experimentation. All that is the story of us, along with the forgetting of what words mean. Kalima is not a holy place. Eden is not paradise. Elohim is not God. It's all stories of caution live animals, genetic experiments in progress. So I love that touch in the Marky Mark version, but the whole concept, and I think, I don't know about you, Lorilei, but I was allowed to watch Planet of the Apes when it came out all those years ago when we were both very small.
Yeah, I was,
But I had friends who weren't allowed to watch it.
Yes.
And I don't think it was just because the gorilla masks were scary. There is something very disturbing about that whole story, and I think we recognize it when we watch it. We know that we are looking at our history when we watch those movies. That's my feeling.
I don't know, because it's you know what, I think there was like I said, there was something always to it, because when this came out, I was young. And there were a lot of thoughts and questions, and it just seemed too close to reality. So do we, through our subconscious, higher self, whatever it is, yes, we know the beginnings of our origin. So yes, because there was a TV series I remember, and I think I was probably 7 or 8 being able to watch it and really enjoying it. But there was always an uncomfortable feeling, and I never really put 2 and 2 together till we had this conversation right now. I do want to share something with you, though. There was it's a little bit off topic, but not really, when it comes to genetic modification and possibly simian origins. There is a video that a friend of mine, he's been on my show before, his name's Michael Roser, and he had shared it in a fellow paranormal group asking, is this a baby Bigfoot? And I'll send you the video after the show. When you first see it, it looks so fake, the fur, but the face of this being is so human-like, and the hands look human, but ape-like with the nails, okay? But so you might think this is a hoax. Well, then they cut to another part of the video. This little being is walking around, running around, sounds almost like monkey sounds, but does not have the gait or walk of anything simian whatsoever. And I just happened to come across a video too, where these scientists were talking about genetic origami, gene origami, and how they now have the capability of weaving genes to create, if you will, a trapper basket. You're probably well aware of this. Maybe the listeners might not have heard of this, where they can put anything from explosives to smart, it doesn't matter what. And the key, they design a key to open it at their choosing, whether it's something like EMF or whatever. So my whole point where I'm going with this was, all I keep hearing now, is it from spirit or not? Was this actually the surviving being, this little one, of something mixed with a simian fetal, bunch of fetal cells and human fetal cells?
Well, the Popol Vuh, which is the Mayan story of origins, says that the ET visitors, they call them engineers, those who engineer, had produced us from a primate ancestor.
Right.
And that in the experiments that resulted in us, there were some other unsuccessful outcomes. So they produced something. I mean, if you can imagine engineering something like a gorilla and then finding out it won't work for you and bring you your food, that was the kind of mistake they were coming up in the process. And so it said they got to us, but they also produced some ape-like creatures that live in the forest. Well, that's an intriguing phrase, isn't it? Because when it says some ape-like creatures that live in the forest, did it mean some animals or some species? And when it says ape-like creatures, does it mean ape kind, or does it mean something like an ape?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you put that story along the Australian stories of the Yowie, the Chinese stories of the Yeren, the American stories of Sasquatch, so on and so forth, the New Zealand stories, the Moihau.
Mm-hmm.
That absolutely fits.
Absolutely.
Our ancestors tell us there are creatures like apes that live in the forests. They're not apes.
Nope.
They are like apes. And we recently did on the Fifth Kind TV a documentary about the Australian Yowie. And just like you're saying, they're like apes in the sense that they've got thick hair, but they don't walk like an ape.
Nope.
And the emotionality and intelligence through the face is not like an ape. Some of the interactions are more intelligent than so I think that what we are experiencing all around the world, what our ancestors talk about, absolutely correlate with what the Popol Vuh says, that primate ancestor produced us and some others that from time to time we bump into.
I would have to agree with you. I know somebody that teaches remote viewing. I actually need to contact her because she's agreed to be on the show, and I'd love to have her on. Lori Williams is her name, and she is a remote viewer. And I guess she's been tested at about 85% accuracy. And the reason I share that is she had no interest in Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call this being. And she was asked by Connie Willis, who used to be on YouTube quite a bit. I think she's gone private with what she does, to do a remote viewing session with a Sasquatch, we'll call it. And she did. And she knew nothing about this species, but the information that she brought back was absolutely astounding. Like, she actually talks about she could actually smell the odor. And when we had this conversation, she said it was the leader of their group, like a very wizened grandfather, if you will. And when she mentioned the odor, he said, "Well, we think you stink." Like, there were other words he used, but I'm praising here. And then she asked a lot of questions, and the wisdom and intelligence, never mind what we see on the face, and the explanations and things like that. No, she never got into their origin, because I wish she had. And I've been trying to find this interview. It's not on YouTube anymore, because my partner Dell was really interested. He wanted to see this. But isn't this interesting? And it makes total sense, because it doesn't matter what they create. Sorry, I'll just finish this one thought. They always have bits and pieces that don't result in what they wish to create, right? Go ahead with your thoughts. Sorry.
Yes, that's right. I was trying to remember the name of somebody who had sought to get some more developed communication going telepathically with North American Sasquatch.
Right.
And the conversation that they had information coming from the other side that basically said, we are part of the same experiment. It was words like that. Wow. And so when I heard that, I thought, oh, my goodness. I believe that because of what I've read that is centuries old. This person believes that because they've received it telepathically. Wow. And I would want to meet that person and say, I think that's right. I think our ancestors knew this. Let's pool our knowledge and we'll find a coherent picture emerges.
Mm-hmm. That makes total sense. But the thing where I think they failed, if you will, theys, is thinking maybe this was a failure. But my true belief about whatever the name you want to use for Bigfoot, Sasquatch, they have access to a lot of these hidden abilities we're talking about. I believe that they can be multidimensional. I believe they communicate telepathically. There are so many things. And these things, I believe, absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we have these abilities as human beings. Now, the operative word is, how do we unlock these abilities again? Because I think it's possible. You know, healing ourselves, all these things we've been talking about. Has your research been able to point out anything that human beings can do to start accessing these abilities or turning on that switch?
Certainly. Well, I mentioned a number in the Scars of Eden. the cultures that have curated these stories of our beginnings have also curated shamanic and mystical modalities for switching our brains back on.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Mesoamericans, who have this story about those who engineer, they have tea ceremonies, which are aimed at altering our brain waves, altering our state of consciousness so that we can perceive another dimension and interact with other dimensional beings. And that is not limited to Central America. Plato, the great philosopher, 2,500 years ago, said he got some of his information that way because the Greeks had their own psychoaffective tea called kykeon.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are botanical approaches that are taken, and Native Americans have botanical traditions as well, aimed at the same thing. Aboriginal Australians aimed at the same thing. It's not something I've used personally at this point, but I find it fascinating. I've got friends who have, and when I compare notes with them, once again, the things I'm deriving from studying ancient texts, they're deriving from these direct experiences through these tea ceremonies. So that's one. Aboriginal Australians have smoking and dance ceremonies aimed at shifting their brainwaves to the point where, again, they're perceiving this other dimension that is called dream time.
Right.
Native Americans, again, very similar modalities there. The one I've used the most myself is the controlled conscious breathing, which, as I say, I learned from Eastern Orthodoxy. And I found that by practicing that in association with other things, so I've gotten into grounding or earthing as well, and sunning as well, and just try and get my body healthy and in the flow of energies between the sun and the earth, heat energy, light energy, electrical energy, getting myself aligned in that kind of way simply by walking barefoot on a sunny day. It's not complicated. But then the controlled conscious breathing, as I've practiced that, I have had experiences of telepathic connection, remote viewing, precognition, enough to believe that that is an effective way of switching some of these higher capacities on. And there are various saints in the Orthodox tradition that I've followed who used that method and who got very, very proficient in those things: remote viewing, precognition, and then powers of healing, self-healing, and healing others as well. So I would point people in those directions. And the methods I've mentioned there are so universal. You will find an expression of all of them probably on every continent on the planet.
Yes, I think I have to agree with you. Actually, two of the videos, and again, when I share the show that we did, I shared the first one. It's because I've been talking to so many people, whether they've contacted me, it's been a reading, whatever it's been, because it was valuable information, as I know this show is going to be. But again, I tell people I'm not trying to self-promote myself on YouTube, but I have quite a few videos teaching people how to access, how to feel color, how to create and feel energy, why gratitude is so important, music, about raising your vibration, but actually understanding the lyrics and how they can really empower you. But the two videos I share the most, one is called How to Create a Love Shield. And it's for maybe you're going into a situation where you're very sensitive to energy. I believe all humans are, but there's a lot of toxic people. You can feel it. So instead of coming from a place of fear, I walk them through how to create that shield utilizing the most powerful emotion on this planet, I believe, love. And then the other one is called grounding and gritting. And I tell people the video takes about 5 to 10 times longer to explain than it does to do. So I explain to them, if you can, before your feet hit the ground, run through these two processes. The other thing that people find amazing is how powerful intention is. So you can create whatever you want with this. So you want it to be like say you're you're at work, that mid-afternoon crash. Well, if you believe that that's what's going to happen, say with your love shield, you can get it to be self-fueling. You can create whatever you want with your mind, and then teaching people to ground, like you said, or earthing, to connect with the center of the earth. I call her Gaia. You can call it whatever you want, I say in the video, but exchanging that energy that no longer serves you, that stress, the lower vibrational emotion, and then asking the center of the earth to send up what you require that is for your highest good. And the way I explain it too is with photosynthesis. It's a symbiotic relationship we have with the earth, because we do, right? And most people can picture that and understand it. And it's so
Mm.
powerful. The other thing about healing with the power of the mind, one of my friends he has created something called a mastermind, where he believes more when two or more minds are focused on the same thing, you multiply it by each other. So 10 people in the room, you harness the brain power of 100 minds, right? But there's a video he shared with me. There's a woman in China laying on an ultrasound table. She has a very inoperable bladder tumor. And there are three ancient monks there chanting, as I understand, with the use of a translator. They are chanting, "It is done. It is done. It is done." You see no cuts in the video. Within 3 minutes, that tumor disappear. So how does that happen, right?
That's wonderful. That is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some wonderful wisdom layered into the Hebrew stories that reflect what you've just said. And there's a moment in Abraham's story
Mm-hmm.
where essentially he's been given an impossible promise,
Mm-hmm.
and he pictures it done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he moves into the reality of it. That's how he manifests it, to use modern language.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the simplicity of putting it that way. Picture it done.
Yes.
And more when I do laying on of hands or speaking to a condition, I'm very brief about that. And what I'm doing with my mind is I'm picturing it done.
Mm-hmm.
I think, sometimes if somebody presents a problem, whether it's a physical problem or a situational problem, we can very easily get pulled into the anxiety of that.
Yes.
And I certainly experienced that as a Christian going into prayer, where you suddenly start, oh no, this is terrible. Oh Lord, please help this.
Yes.
This is a really bad break. And the energy you're pooling when you do that is terrible.
Yes.
And if you could just take a step back,
Yes.
let's picture that fixed.
Yes.
Let's put our hands over that. It's a totally different experience, and very often a totally different outcome. So that's a bit of the journey I've made as well, learning to picture things done, because that is exciting, motivating. It raises our vibrations to a point where we can make a positive contribution instead of enter the morass of the situation.
Right. I love that. I'm going to read a few comments here. I'm so engrossed. I could talk to you for hours, because we're just so passionate about this work that we do. And I swear to God, whenever you're free, I won't bug you all the time, but I would love to have, I just love talking to you about this stuff, because
Likewise.
you know what you're talking about, and we're speaking the same language, even though we may be using different terminology. But it's so powerful, and like you said, can be very simplistic to the point that anybody can understand it. It's exposing everybody to understand what we are and what we've been told that we're not. But yes, we are so much more than what we've ever been told.
Definitely.
So there's just a few comments. So Zachman, I'm going to go back a bit. He said, one thing that cults of personality all share, they are able to convince their followers that they can relate to them, and that they are the only things that can solve all the world's problems. I have to agree with that. And fear is the tool. Right? Fear is the tool, and you just don't know when, a lot of people think when they're being silenced right now, then it must be disinformation, or they have the belief that because I need a leader, because I don't know if I see many people believing the leader is like a parent, and the parent would never do anything wrong. They've never done anything wrong. So they follow, and then they may get a glimpse of something else. And you can't blame people because they're so torn. Like, what do I believe, right? But I think we all have that inner sense and knowing. And you've heard people say it before, I'm going to trust my gut. So I always say to people, if you're not sure, if they ask, because I don't like to tell people what to think. I say, if this ever resonates with you, please do your own research, but also sit with that when it's quiet, slowing down your breathing, like you said, and ask yourself, does this seem true? And wait. Or does this seem true? And wait. We always know. It's just whether we want to listen or not, right?
I think that's absolutely right. I'm sure everyone can think of many occasions when something has happened and they said, I knew it.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you knew it and you didn't pay attention, or you knew it and you didn't take action. And what should have happened, as you say, is slow down enough to register what you know, what your gut is saying, and have the confidence that you are intelligent,
Yes.
you are conscious. You ask the universe the question, you expect the answer. And so many of our spiritual greats taught us that. We've all got this. We each need to learn to slow down a bit, listen to our gut, and realize that not only do all of us have glimpses of things we find fantastical, like precognition or remote viewing, but we all have a very healthy gut that picks up on things about situations and people and foods and circumstances, whatever it might be. You know, these are survival skills.
Yes.
That our ancestors needed. Is it safe to walk on this land? Is this food safe to eat? Are these safe people who are walking towards us? You know, let's honor how intelligent our guts are, because they were given to us for survival, but also for thriving. And, you know, most of us, when we think back to the, oh, I knew it.
Yes.
Those are not necessarily survival stories, but they are, did we thrive in that moment stories? And I actually think we're wired to thrive if we will give our guts enough attention.
I agree, because I call that evidential proof. When you find something, whether you listen to it or not, and if you didn't, and then you find out that it was true, you did know, or you follow it and then it is true. Now, there's two other things I was going to add, and one of them is a fellow Australian. I know you're not originally from Australia, but that's where you live now. Ina Segal, and I use her book like a Bible. You must be aware of her work, right? Have you heard of her?
I have not read her work. You have to tell me, Lorilei.
Oh, you're going to have.
Tell me more.
Okay, so I'll tell you the story quickly.
I've got such a huge must-read list.
Oh,
I must add Ina to it.
I love this book because I share it with people all the time. And the reason why is she was originally from where the nuclear reactor meltdown was, when the previous, well, it's not Russia, it wasn't Russia then, but back over in that area. Pardon?
At Chernobyl.
Thank you. And her brother, they were both little at the time, and her brother was going to die if they didn't move. So her parents emigrated to Australia. And she goes on to tell the story about how she had to learn a new language and what have you. Her brother did get better, but unfortunately, she started developing this horrific pain in her back at a very young age. Excuse me. By the time she was 18, she was bedridden. Her spine was completely almost like not even an S, but like a winding road. She was on an exorbitant amount of painkillers, but she said she'd always been incredibly intuitive. And she got angry one day, and she had this very angry conversation, she says, with God. And again, I'm not doing it justice, but very quickly, she got some information, probably could have been her higher self, could have been her guides, I'm not sure, but telling her, you are able to heal this. She ended up developing this process of speaking to the part in the body that needs healing, and speaking to it, just like we had talked at the beginning, that this was an actual being in itself. But yes, she calls it activating your sacred inner healing, I believe, but it's really talking to your higher self. And then she teaches you how to work with color and energy and how to, again, this is why I feel so strongly and have a video myself. I do it different than she does, but the process I use, I want the person watching the video to use what works for them rather than me telling you, because I think you'll remember better than when you're about to use it. You're going, what did she say? What step is this? But with Ina, and what I love about it, she breaks down in this book, it's called The Secret Language of Your Body, the emotions that go behind every disease process and every part of your body and what's affected with that. And she walks you through how she healed herself, and she teaches you and others how to do this. That's why I love this book.
Oh, I've got to read that book.
I will
I'm
send you.
sure I could do with some of that myself, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But I love that aspect of speaking to your body as if it has intelligence and can
It does. She tells
understand
you it will
what you're saying.
ask it. Like she said, when you're
Exactly.
quiet,
And you can ask it questions.
because she says we have gotten away from that process of listening to our bodies. It will give you the answer. The other thing is too is not only asking it, but like I said, sitting in that quiet moment. And like I said, again, sorry, my brain's going a mile a minute as I'm seeing the pages of the book. But when I share something with somebody that's going through an issue, say it's a back, there are a lot of questions she asks you to ask yourself, including about the emotions. Is this associated with this? Is this? I always tell people, please don't send me the answers. This is for you, and this is for you to work through. But she teaches you how to take, for example, and she does set the colors for people. So she will tell you that if this, and this is associated with the problem with your back, and say maybe it's unresolved child trauma, maybe it's anger, repressed anger, maybe whatever it may be, she will tell you what page and what color to use. She will teach you how to make that ball of energy and to place it as you activate your divine healing intelligence. Now, the other thing I wanted to add when you're talking about human beings being able to thrive, I also teach people how to use your body as a pendulum when you're out, so that you don't look like a nut bar swinging this rope. You know, you're picking, is this good for me? Is this good for me? So you can
Yeah.
ask your body, like you could have two vitamins, bottles of vitamins in your hand or one, and say, is this good for me? Your body will tell you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that. And it's learning to recognize your body's signals.
And hear it again.
Which one did you lean towards? You know, little cues like that that we need to learn to pick up on. I tell you who got me onto this track that we're discussing.
Yes.
And it was my previous cat.
Your cat.
We talked about cats last time.
I love cats, yes.
And I had a wonderful cat called Raoul some years ago, who was super smart, very large cat, healthy until his old age. And then we noticed a change in his behavior. When I moved to Australia, he moved to live with my mum and dad. And they noticed that they would bring the shopping home from the supermarket, and the cat would ferret through the shopping bags looking for milk, yogurt, cheese, butter, ice cream, anything dairy, and would wait until my parents gave him some of that. And they thought, oh, that's funny. His tastes have changed. Well, a little while later, he came home one evening and he had lost a lot of strength in one of his legs. He was really limping. And they were mystified by this, so they did some investigations, and it turned out my poor cat had diabetes. And the vet said, have you noticed any difference in Raoul's eating habits? And they said, yes, he's been craving dairy. And he said, oh, well, that's because he knows that that's his best route to managing his insulin. That's why he's asking for dairy. I thought, what? My cat knew it needed to manage its insulin, and it could do it by using dairy, which it had never eaten before. If my cat knows that, why on earth don't I know when my body needs to vary its diet? And that got me on this track of thinking, I surely cannot be less intelligent than my cat.
True.
If my cat knows how to operate his body, I need to learn how to operate my body, and
Yeah,
I need to start listening to what my body is telling me in the way my cat listens to his body. And
true.
so that was the beginning of that journey for me.
That is so cool that you put two and two together. You always have these great animal stories, and I'm a major animal lover, but I wanted to point something out. The reason why I believe babies and young children, as well as animals, can see spirit, know these things. Maybe children not so much because they're not able to express in the words that they probably would know, even infants. I know I have some stories of people communicating with their children that are nonverbal, like a grandmother asking, are you the reincarnated version of so and so, meaning a previous ancestor, and giving them a wholehearted yes, not verbal yet, like 8, 9 months old, wasn't a coincidence. Because I think
Mm.
that we come in with a lot of that intelligence and higher self, right? And as we get older, we lose a lot of those memories. But with animals, I also believe is because children's work, I believe, is play the same as animals, and they truly are capable of living in the now. That's already the past to them. You know, you find people that, of course, hearts of gold, taking an animal, rescuing from a very tragic, tragic life. And I mean, there's people say like Caesar Milan, for example, that is able to so all of a sudden transform these animals. Well, I don't think it's so much that he's not invested in that story because he actually understands that animals, yes, they experience trauma, but they are able to move past that because they live in the now. I don't know. What's your thoughts about that?
That is very true. And I do think that is the gift
Hmm.
animals give us when they allow us to have them as
I
pets.
agree. I
Certainly, observing our pets, we find our pets are very forgiving.
very.
And I use that language, but you could say they're in the now. That happened then, and this is now. And unless you've got a destructive pattern,
Mhm.
they're going to forgive you. But for me, having my cat sit on my lap for a snuggle because he wants his tummy rubbed and he wants to stare into my face
Mhm.
when he does it, he's given me a great gift of pulling me into the moment because I can't do anything else in that moment. I
Mhm.
can't work.
Mhm.
I can't read my book. I've
Sometimes
just
they
got
make
to
sure you can.
enjoy the moment. They will sit on your book, exactly. And they're not doing it to annoy you or waste their time or just because they want to be worshipped.
Mhm.
They are helping us
Mhm.
by rooting us in the present moment.
Yeah.
There have been so many studies done on the benefits of it. Again, slowing our heart rate,
Mhm.
bringing us back into our body where we are using our physical senses.
Mhm.
This is their gift to us. And really, people, there's a deal. Why would we have pets if it didn't advantage us?
Mhm.
I know a lot of people with cats. I know very few people whose cats will catch mice for them, although ours do. The
Gift.
deal is the cats make them feel happy.
Mhm.
The cats slow them down. The cats bring them into the present moment and make them feel content. And that is their gift to us.
I agree with that, and I believe animals are the epitome of unconditional love. But I'm going to share this with you. I believe this came from spirit, but especially with cats and the purr that they have. Cats don't always choose one spot when they lay on you. They pick various different spots. And I truly believe this was spirit shared by spirit. They actually know, just like your cat knew what would heal diabetes, that chakra area in your body needs healing. And that's why they choose sometimes the top of your head, your chest, your lap, maybe it's your feet. Cats of all animals are just incredible, incredible healers, I believe. Hmm.
I agree with that. And we talked last time about the healing intelligence of horses, that
Yes, yes.
anyone who's been involved in using horses to help people with mental health problems or behavioral problems will tell you that the horses know what they are doing. They know that their job is to help that person to heal, and they know how to do it. I haven't witnessed it myself, but I know people who are involved in that work, and that is their conclusion over decades of working with horses. And I think that it's at a species level that there is an agreement between horses and humans that this is what they will do for us. You know, we look through history, and you might think, oh, poor horses have agreed to be our slaves, you know, to pull our vehicles and slave for us. No, they have an agreement to help us, and they have got a far more important contribution to human health than pulling a cart. And that's what we're now relearning, because, of course, we have ancestors who knew this too. But in our generation, I think we're learning it afresh.
No, I agree with you. And the only other thing I was going to add, because I want to get back to this ancestry, we got about a half hour. It always flies by so quick with you, Paul, is I have seen that firsthand with animals. My son has severe autism, and he's now 23, and with no disrespect, I may have mentioned some in the last show, he's like at that precocious 5 to 7 year old age where, you know, they can be a little bit independent, but they still need mom and dad for everything. And he's always going to be that way. I believe he chose to come to Earth. That's another discussion for another show. We've had much
to
input on
teach.
that, and I believe it. Yes,
came with a teaching assignment. Yes,
yes.
I'm very close to a very similar story, Lorilei, so I absolutely get what you're saying.
Well, then the next show we got to talk about, if you're comfortable. But what I wanted to add about the horses, we did try to give him every opportunity. And although he was nonverbal, and going outside at a very young age of 3 to 4 was so traumatic for him, the minute he knew we were going to therapeutic riding, he would be very calm in the car. The horse would be so calm. You're exactly what you just said. It was like the horse knew. There wasn't it didn't matter. My son wouldn't freak out on the horses, but there would be other kids maybe that would, or have a meltdown. Nothing fazed these horses. It's like they knew that's why they were there. And it had a profound effect on the children too. Mm-hmm.
I can believe that.
It did. So I want to ask you now, getting back to these ancestors, because you said something very profound the last show, and I hadn't considered it, but I agree that what you had, and again, I'm probably not going to word it as beautifully as you did, but you had put out, I believe, the thought of, what if this just wasn't coming at a global level at what's going on? What's going on is coming from an ET level of somebody wanting their planet back. I'd love for you to, if you've got any more thoughts on that or info.
Well, just before Christmas, Haim Eshed, the former chief of space security for Israel,
right,
a brigadier general who held that position for 27 years, came out and said, on the basis of his experience and his work, he believes that there is an intergalactic federation, a diversity of ET demographics with a stakeholding in Project Earth or Planet Earth, who are in contact at a covert government level and who have chosen not to self-disclose.
Right.
Now, when he said that, some might have thought, oh my goodness, where's this coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Those of us who read world mythology and ancient ancestral narratives would recognize what he's saying as a repetition of what our ancestors told us.
Right.
So namely that there is a diverse range of ET demographics surrounding us with different agendas for Project Earth.
Okay.
And I think when we look at the geopolitics around us and the conflicting agendas that we're observing, the culture wars that we're observing. I mean, in the 21st century, we've got wars around access to water. I think it's going to be huge in the century ahead. Is that a human right, or is that a right for corporations? Access to water, access to food, to fertile crops that we can seed next year's crop from, or is it all we have to buy it from the GM company down the road? So there are farming wars, food wars, water wars, information wars, education wars. wars. And when we look at the geopolitics and ask, why is this happening? What is this about? I think there are many layers of answer. You can answer it purely at a human level. This country is in competition with this country, or this corporation that dominates this country is in competition with this corporation. So it's all at a human level.
Right.
But if we accept the language of Intergalactic Federation, Sky Council, there's another layer that we don't know about, the covert government level, the ET level, where there are different agendas for the planet and maybe for us as a species. And then we read some of our ancestral stories of the Intergalactic Council, and we discover there are other kinds of being in the picture as well, interdimensional beings, energy-based beings. And some of the stories about energy-based beings are not very nice ones, because they want human pain, they want human suffering, they want human conflict, and they're here to harvest that. And there is some kind of a relationship among these demographics, somewhat at war with each other, somewhat in a kind of a truce. And I think it's the push and pull of all that that we're sensing in all the upheavals we're seeing at the beginning of the 21st century. So I don't know if that addresses what you were hinting at there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I guess
so in answer to how we engage with that, because you can listen to that and think, oh, blimmin' heck, well, what do I do then?
I'm so glad I was going to ask you that.
I'll just sit down and have a cup of tea then, shall I?
And just wait.
I think, at the micro level, sitting down and having a cup of tea is probably not a bad thing to do, because if you want to live in the soup of energy-based beings that love human misery, then we have to get back to what we were talking about before, about being very conscious about what emotional state I allow myself to get into, very conscious about looking after my own health, looking after my own lifestyle. Now, I think I mentioned last time, we've just relocated. I'm broadcasting from a building site here because we've relocated to a house we're totally renovating, because we wanted more space around us, because of the impact on our health of that, because we wanted fresher air to breathe, because we wanted enough ground that we can grow more of our own food in. Mm-hmm. So looking after ourselves in that kind of a way, in a time of lockdowns, looking after yourself consciously in terms of how much emotional jam am I getting, to put it that way? Am I getting time with people who make me feel happy, or am I just being drained by the people that I'm working with? How can I get time with people who love me and who I love? We're having to be much more deliberate about that in a time of lockdowns. Mm-hmm. And just to touch on what you were talking about before, about setting intention, before you step out your front door, have you taken a pause to make sure you're in a place where you are going to be emoting joy, friendliness, love, care, happiness, whatever the situation you're going to go in, is your injection going to be one of love and care and positivity? And to set that intention before you get out of bed, after you finish grooming yourself, before you step out the front door. These things are how, you talked about the power of love as a shield. This is how we thrive when we're walking in a soup of negativity, whether it's human, archonic, energy-based, whatever it is. So at an individual level, yes, that cup of tea. Yes, looking after yourself. Yes, making sure that you're doing everything you can to be happy and content and healthy. At a bigger level, then I am glad Hayam Ashed has made a statement, and I'm grateful to people like the late Ed Mitchell, who says we must get cleverer in terms of our diplomacy in our contact with other races, other species, because Ed Mitchell said, look, we're a spacefaring civilization now. This is our planet, and we need to be at that table. We need to be in that discussion among the Intergalactic Federation, saying, well, this is our planet. These are our agendas. This is what we want. And we have some friends around the table here. Our ancestors talked about friends from the Pleiades. Our
Mhm.
ancestors talked about friends from Sirius.
Yeah.
If we're friends, let's use those friendships so that we're not all alone and at the mercy of species with higher tech or interdimensional capability.
Mhm.
If we have friends, let's be friends, let's make that work. And that is the aspect of exopolitics
Mhm.
that I think is so important moving forward. And one of the reasons why I want to break the taboo around the question of we're in company here. And the Scars of Eden is really an attempt to get people breaking that taboo by sharing their own stories and realizing we're all in company. And once enough of us realize that's the case, then perhaps we're in a place where some of the covert government can become a bit more overt, and we can hear a little bit more about what's happening at that leadership level to look after the planet and to look after us.
Agreed. Agreed. Because everything you've said, I agree 100%. And the thing is, even for someone, say, like my son, to be able to explain this, and he's been playing Call of Duty. So, and he thought that Mr. Biden was the only bad guy. So I had to explain to him, no, I'm not calling him a bad guy. No, I'm not saying that, because he hears stuff, right? He sees on YouTube. So I said, no, that's not what we're talking about. So I actually had to explain it in the terms of white hats and black hats if you were playing, but there's bigger players kind of thing, right? But the whole thing I was talking about, why I brought
Yes,
this up, was because even somebody at that developmental level gets it with the point that when you get angry, when you're sad, when you're jealous, when you're raging towards what you really think you're seeing, I said, that's food for the other side. So
yes,
we want to give them, he only eats 6 foods. He understands the food thing very much. So, you've never had a vegetable in your life, right? I said, well, when you send them love, you send them you're happy, all these good emotions. I said, that's like sending you broccoli. That's what you're sending to them. He is able to understand that. And that's where I guess my frustration sometimes sits, is that people are fighting over the silliest things. And you know what? There were times, and you say a personal situation that you would understand. When he was little and he was nonverbal, there were times when he'd be raging for 3, 4 hours. All you could do was hold him. So he was safe, everything was safe. And I don't share it for pity. I share it for this reason, is I actually believe this came from spirit. And I was sitting there one day and I heard, if this doesn't make any difference 10 minutes from now, let alone 10 years from now, let it go and pick your battles. And that's what I wish the whole world could see right now, that it's almost like, don't notice the little man behind the curtain from the Wizard of Oz, right? If we could just all put our differences aside, agree to disagree, and unite as a human race, imagine what we could do.
exactly,
Hmm.
exactly. If we could live more emotionally intelligent
I love it. Yeah.
as cultures,
Mhm.
then we wouldn't be governed this way.
I agree.
And obviously, we long for better government, and we probably, if we're in the West, we long for more democracy and more equity.
Hmm.
But we have to take responsibility for who we are as a culture,
Hmm.
because to an extent, the leadership that we're provided with will reflect the culture that we are.
I
And
agree.
if we're all emotionally intelligent enough that we can't be manipulated by a demagogue or a xenophobe,
Hmm.
then it's not going to happen.
I agree.
And maybe we just have to say, well, we deal with the cards we have,
Hmm.
and that's about shaping our culture. And then leadership will have to catch up with the reality of that.
So, how do we engage our friends? Our friends, because that was my next question. Are you anticipating that we may see first contact, or do you think that it'll just sort of happen? Do you think it'll be planned, or how do we engage with our friends intergalactically. I understand how, and there are many people that do, but there's probably a lot of our listeners, this may even be new to them to hear about ET involvement and this whole conversation we've had.
Well, let me say something left field here.
Okay.
In the New Testament, in 1 John 4, is a little verse from the writer John talking about channeling, and to be discerning when you do your channeling, that not every spirit or entity that speaks to you is going to be telling you the truth. So be a bit discerning. Now, Christians might say, what? That's in the Bible?
Yeah.
Because that's not part of Christianity. No, that's right. It kind of got edited out, like I talked about earlier. But go back to the beginning, and the apostles knew about that. They knew about being in communication with entities that were not human, some of whom are benevolent and helpful and here to assist. So I mentioned that because it's one of those taboo areas, certainly for Christians. And then because of that, for mainstream society, channeling is regarded as like a fringy thing. It's not fringy at all. It's been central to every culture around the world. And in that passage, to use an example, it doesn't say what or who the spirits are. It doesn't say, well, these are your ancestors, or these are interdimensional beings, or this is your higher self. Could be any of those, doesn't say. It just expects you to be in conversation.
And discerning.
And discerning. That's right. So I do think there is, just like we talked about the possibility of information about Sasquatch coming through channeling earlier, there's information you get about all sorts of things through channeling. And I'm learning to give a lot more respect to people who have developed that ability. I, through my research for the Scars of Eden, now believe we are in a soup of other entities, and it is possible to communicate. So if we're looking for friends and for wisdom and how to move forward, then I think we need to embrace that aspect of things. Other races who are communicating with us through channeling. It doesn't mean they're spirits or they're energy-based beings, because I think there are other species very similar to us who this is how they communicate with us. So there's that. And then in the Scars of Eden, I invite people to share their own anomalous stories of something funny happened to me years ago. I've never gotten my head around it, and I don't quite remember what happened next. If we can all pool stories like that we all journey with, then I think we'll begin to notice stories about another presence among us. And I'm talking about the presence of beings that, with religious language, we might call angels, or with ET language, we might say, I think there are some Pleiadians wandering around here, or some Lyrans, or some Syrians wandering around here. If we begin to do business with the idea that there is another presence here that is here to help, and to be willing to pause and notice that, well, that has to precede engaging with it. So I would suggest that. We mentioned Chernobyl earlier, and the official news agency at that time, I think it was Pravda, reported that for several hours, reactor number 4, that if it had exploded, if it really had melted down, it would have done a Fukushima to a quarter of Europe. It would have been a catastrophe. And it didn't melt down. And the newspaper suggested there might be a connection with the fact that it didn't melt down and the fact that for several hours there was a UFO visible to hundreds of people hovering near that reactor. Now, I hear that story and I find it very encouraging, because it suggests some of our friends are not only present, but they're helping.
Yes.
And we need to notice it, and then we need to engage with it. Yes, there'll be things going on at a covert government level that you or I might not know about.
Right.
But you or I might have contact as well. And when we do, let's ask some questions. Let's get some wisdom.
Mhm.
Should I be doing something different? Is this
Yeah.
something I should know?
Mhm.
And tap the wisdom that's available, whether it's person to person or through channeling. I just think these are the baby steps, if I can put it that way,
Mhm.
in walking into this territory of a populated universe where we want to stand up and take a more adult place.
I agree wholeheartedly. One thing I'd add, and I want to hear your thoughts on it, because we got just a few more minutes, is meditation. Would you add meditation to that list? Because I do channel, I do automatic,
Yes,
and I will warn people when I'm connecting with spirit very quickly. And if you asked me years ago, it would have been an angel or a guide. Now I'm open to whatever, as long as it's coming through with something meant in love and for people's higher self. I'm willing to entertain that what I might have thought was an angel could very well have been or could be somebody from the Pleiades or many of the places, Lyra or Lyran, being Syrian, whoever it may be, as long as they're coming in love, like I said, and for people's highest good. But meditation, oh, the incredible experiences you can have with beings and the questions you can ask. You can hold classes, I've done, crystals, never mind help amplify. But go ahead, I want to give you a chance to talk about it.
absolutely yes to meditation. I mentioned that I was a fan of Eastern Orthodoxy and the Hesychast tradition, which is the controlled conscious breathing.
Mhm.
There's a guy who was very developed in that called Saint Seraphim of Sarov, who lived 1759 to 1833. And he had an amazing ability in receiving information from somewhere else,
Mhm.
accurate information, insights that then enabled him to do healing among people. And he said that the key to it was to acquire a peaceful spirit.
Mhm.
And so, whatever modality you use for that, whatever method you follow,
Mhm.
I think that's step one for getting clarity and getting information from these other sources. And I see meditation in that context, or what other people might call mindfulness.
Yes,
And I talk about some mindfulness exercises on my channel, the Paul Wallis channel.
I love your
I
channel.
think if you alter your state,
Mhm.
get into a place where you are peaceful, relaxed, awake, and alert, and then pay attention to what happens next.
I agree.
So, with that as a framework, then yes to meditation, absolutely.
I love it because I actually call it my workspace, and I'm very creative and I'm constantly doing something to create or use my hands. I never realized why I love it so much, but part of it is, and I've tried the conscious breathing, love that. Sometimes I'll use binaural beats when I've gone to sleep at night, turned it down very quiet with the headphones. My brain is open, the subconscious is open. You get a lot of interesting stuff and things that way when I'm channeling. That's where I was going with that. Like I said, my brain always works so fast that I realize I never completed that thought. When I'm channeling, I will warn people because I'll start talking faster and faster and faster and faster, and things will just start coming. I won't remember what I've said, and it's being channeled. And it's not that I'm so special. I believe anybody can do this. You just have to quiet the mind,
Yes,
be able to slow down the body, retrain our bodies how to listen to our bodies and what we're connecting with in those quiet spaces, right?
definitely. And something I'd add to that is storytelling.
Yes.
Um, my daughter, I think it was last year,
Mhm.
uh, just as she's preparing to go to bed, she
Mhm.
said to me, said, I was just thinking about, there could be other beings, wandering around our bit of Canberra, and they're watching us, and they're kind of laughing at us because they're saying, oh, look, everything these guys have is stuck to the ground because they don't know how to manipulate gravity. Now, she was 11 years old when she was saying this, and they're laughing at us because we live on the surface
Mhm.
and everything we use is stuck to the ground. And I said, Evie, well, do you know that is very possible? That's exactly what's happening. And
Brilliant.
she
How
said,
to
yeah, actually, I thought that as well. But she had told it to herself as a story first
Mhm.
and then reflected, oh, that could be true. And that's just a little picture. I think when we get into storytelling mode, we can often find ourselves speaking truth without realizing that's what we're doing. And some of our script writers use that. They use that when they write books, when they make movies. Some use it when they do stand-up.
Yes.
And they come away thinking, oh, my goodness, what did I just say?
Yeah.
I was just trying to be funny. I was just telling stories, and all this stuff came out. I think that is another kind of aspect of channeling without using the word.
Absolutely.
When we get into storytelling, our minds are in a different place, and we start receiving and processing things.
Your daughter is brilliant, out of the mouth of babes. And I want to give you time. We just have time to have people tell you. You can tell people where to find you, your amazing channel,
All right.
books. Please come back, Paul. You've been so amazing.
I'd love to talk more.
So
The Fifth Kind TV. Go to the Fifth Kind TV on YouTube. Go to the Paul Wallis channel on YouTube. Go to paulanthonywallis.com, Anthony with an H, Wallis, Wallis, paulanthonywallis.com. You can follow what I'm doing there. You can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, wherever books are sold, get hold of The Scars of Eden and Escaping from Eden. And if you go to my YouTube channels, that's where you can get into a conversation with me.
Awesome. And I'm, like I said, Paul, I can't wait to have you back. And I know, well, you're one of those people I would never do the same show with, because we just go wherever the conversation flows. And I just
love
talking with you.
Lorilei, thank you for having me again. I love my conversations with you. We never know where they're going to go, and that makes it fun.
I know, you're such a pleasure. And I want to tell people,
likewise,
I'm back tomorrow night with my partner in crime, or as I call her, my bestie, she is Seraphine Hurley with Tripping the Void from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern. And if you ever want to get a hold of me, you can find me on facebook.com/The Angel Rock. If you ever want to book a reading, healing session, even some of the things Paul and I have talked about tonight, that's part of my practice. I also do some mentoring. You know what, I've been getting some signs from spirit too. A lot of people are asking a lot of questions, newly awakened people. So I've been promising some courses. So I think that's a sign from spirit. It's time to get those courses out there and start teaching people about some of these things we've talked about, and energy and things like that. Also, lastly, I want to add, I have 2 groups on Facebook, Paranormal University for all things paranormal, and the Angel Rocker Tribe for many of the things that we've discussed tonight, pretty well anything esoteric, energy wise, and so on. I want to thank you again, Paul. I cannot wait till I have you back on again. And I want to thank
forward to it.
That is here. I send you all so much love and light. Have a beautiful evening, morning, or afternoon, wherever you may be. I think we're still live. Joe likes to mess with me. We'll see him if we see clicking in the background.
Oh, well, thanks, Lorilei. I really enjoyed it today.
Thank you, Paul, and I mean that. I would love to. I could talk to you for hours. You're just an absolutely fascinating, wonderful human being. I can understand why your daughter, at the tender age of 11, came out with such an incredible concept.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, amazing. And I'm glad I was there to hear it.
I bet. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here. I will be in touch, I promise.
All right. And I look forward to next time.
Yes. You have a beautiful rest of your day. And thanks so much for making time today to be on.
No worries. All the best. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Now we're still live. We're just waiting for Joe. We'll see if he's done. Thank you, everybody that was here tonight. Gotta love Paul. Oh, thank you, Zach. He said, great show tonight. Thank you, Paul, once again for joining us. Have a good night, everybody. See you all tomorrow night. Definitely. And I will have Paul back again. He is one of those fascinating, incredible individuals. He's kind of like our friend Dan Willis. I've been bugging him to try and get him back on. He's been so busy, but I could have him on probably every week, either him, Paul, or like I mentioned, Dan, and you never do the same show once or twice. You're there.
Hello.
We're all done. I was just jibber jabbering while I was waiting for you to unlive